Hi, it's Phil here, and in this video I'm going to show you how to drain oil from a torque converter on a Mercedes auto transmission. Now this car I've got here has a Mercedes 722.9 transmission, otherwise known as the 7G-tronic gearbox, and it's the Mercedes 7-speed auto. And the first thing I'm going to do is jump into this car to put the auto transmission into neutral, because later on in the video we're going to have to turn the engine and the torque converter to bring the drain plug down into the right position, and it's a lot easier to do if the car's in neutral before you even start. Once you're sure you've got the car in the position where you want to work on it, then with the engine running, go ahead and shift the transmission into neutral. And once you've done that, you can just go ahead and turn the engine off. But what you'll find is with the transmission in neutral and the engine turned off, it won't want to release the key. So you're just going to have to leave it there for the duration of the work. And now it's time to drain the torque converter if we can. Why did I say if we can? Well, the answer is that not all Mercedes 722.9 transmissions have a drain plug on the torque converter. Or if they do have one, it's not accessible through a little port for draining and servicing. In general, the early cars didn't have access to the torque converter plug, but the rule of thumb is if your Mercedes automatic transmission has this type of access port, then you can drain it, and if not, then you probably can't. And so you can see access is a little bit restricted, but this one here should just pull off, and then that gives a little bit better access. And then the cover itself, it's just a flexible rubber, so you can just kind of grab it. Well, you can when it's not really oily. And then that dome shape that you can see in there is the torque converter, and somewhere on it there's a drain plug. And so this is where it gets interesting, because if you can't see it, and chances are you won't be able to, then you need to rotate that round until you can see it. And so in order to bring the drain plug round, then you have to turn the engine over on the crank. And it's easiest to do it from underneath if you take the under tray that's off from underneath the engine. And so these are 8mm bolts. And so now, standing at the front of the car and with the engine under tray off, you can see the cross member there and the radiators just in front of it, and above it is the crankshaft bolt. And then we can reach in with a 27mm socket on a ratchet or a strong bar. And what I'm going to do now is just keep turning the crank clockwise whilst watching the torque converter to see when the drain plug comes round. Okay, so hopefully you can see it alright. The crank's actually quite easy to turn with the transmission in neutral. So I don't always remove this bit of under tray here, but for the purposes of filming and access, I'm going to drop this down, and it's just two more of those 8mm bolts that I mentioned. And holding the trim up with your head is a valid technique, and it actually says it in the Mercedes instruction manual. And to undo that plug, you'll need quite a long 4mm Allen key, and preferably without a ball on the end, because this plug's quite tight, and ball type Allen keys, sometimes the ball snaps off. So it might not look like there's much fluid in there, but there actually is. And the thing is, it's running quite slow because there's no way of air getting into that torque converter, so it's kind of glugging a bit. I've got a new torque converter drain plug here, and it comes with a new copper washer on it, and also it comes with some Loctite on the thread already. The only thing to say is this is an 8mm torque converter plug, which I measured with the vernier calipers, and that means that it's 10 Newton meters tightening torque. On some versions of the 722.9 transmission, they moved it to a 10mm plug. It's worth measuring it, and if you've got a 10mm plug, one, it'll probably need a different Allen key to unfasten it, but it also means that you'll need 15 Newton meters of tightening torque when you put it back in again. That's just in there finger tight at the moment. That's got it. So I just have that little cover to put back in place, and it just pushes in. The Mercedes auto transmission torque converter reprimes with fluid that it takes from the transmission pan, and there's a procedure for doing that. Often people will do it after a full transmission fluid change, for example. But let's jump into the car and I'll show you how to do that. So it's just a case of pushing the gear selector up into park just like that. And now of course it's foot on the brake, and then we can turn the key to get it started up. Now we just let it stay in park for about 10 seconds, and then we'll start to step down through each of the selections on the gear change. So of course the first one is reverse. Remember to keep your foot on the brake though, especially if you're on a ramp like I am. And you could hear the engine tone change a little bit then as it went into reverse gear. So we just need about 10 seconds of that. And then we're going to step it to the next one, which is just neutral. Probably less important, this one. And now finally we're going to go into drive. And again the car moved just a little bit, which showed the gearbox was engaging. And I'll speed this bit up now, because what I do is I'll work my way back up the box again and then down a couple of times, you know, probably being a little bit more thorough than I need to be. Okay, so that's how to drain oil from a torque converter on a Mercedes auto transmission. If you've got any questions or comments at all, go ahead and post them below and I'll try to help if I can. And if you liked this content, please consider subscribing and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching, see you next time.